Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are getting into what is, I think, probably the single most high-stakes piece of casting in, well, all of modern cinema.
It really is. We're talking about the global hunt for the man who will inherit that vacant license to kill.
And it is so much more than just casting, isn't it? It's a whole cultural event.
Oh, absolutely. It's about charting the entire course for the next chapter of James Bond. I mean, Daniel Craig has just closed out his incredible 5-film run. And what he did was it was monumental. He didn't just play 007, he completely redefined the character. He made him grounded, vulnerable, and, well, brutally effective.
He really did. He set a whole new benchmark for what a spy movie should feel like.
He established a new gospel for spy cinema.
Yeah. So the challenge now isn't just finding a good actor. It's finding the next cinematic anchor, the person who's going to carry this multi-billion-dollar enterprise for, what, the next decade and a half?
15 years, potentially. That's the goal. This person will dictate the tone, the limits, the whole ecosystem of the franchise. The stakes are just immense.
And those immense stakes are exactly what drives our mission for you today. We are going to be analyzing the top contenders, all the names that are dominating the chatter, and we're stacking them up against these incredibly strict criteria from the studio.
Some may even say ruthless criteria.
Yes. And that's the fascinating tension here, isn't it? That's the core of this deep dive. It's this conflict between immediate aesthetic perfection.
Right. The guys who look like they were born in a bespoke suit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That versus the actors who strictly meet the very specific, very long-term business requirements of keeping this thing going for 15 years.
It's who looks the part versus who fits the contract. And that tension is everything.
So to really get why some of these huge fan-favorite actors are probably already out of the running, we have to start not with acting ability, but with
the spreadsheet. It all comes down to the spreadsheet.
Let's dive deep into that business spreadsheet then. What are these non-negotiable criteria from the studio? If we forget the charm and the wardrobe for just a second, what are the cold, hard directives?
Well, the number one directive is ruthlessly simple, and it's all about minimizing future risk. And that word is longevity.
Longevity.
The producers are actively and pretty openly seeking an actor who is ideally in their early to mid-30s.
Okay, so why is that age bracket so critical? Why not 40 or even 29? What makes the 30s this Goldilocks zone?
It really boils down to two big factors: contractual commitment and what you might call the economics of physics.
The economics of physics. I like that. Let's start with commitment.
So commitment. This new Bond actor, whoever he is, needs to sign a really restrictive contract. We're talking about a commitment of potentially 10 to 15 years of their life.
Right.
That's 5 or 6 major films, plus all the global press tours, the mandatory training windows in between. It's a huge chunk of a career.
So if they cast someone who's already, say, pushing 45, that window just shrinks dramatically.
It shrinks. And you don't just lose potential films, you lose the stability of the entire franchise. The whole financial model is built on that long run.
Right. So securing that intellectual property, that investment for the longest possible time is the financial end goal.
Precisely. Think about it. If you have to replace Bond every 8 years because the actor aged out, the cost of rebooting the whole narrative, finding a new director, securing new product placement deals,
reestablishing the entire global marketing machine,
it's astronomical. So casting a 35-year-old basically secures your profits for the 2030s and, maybe even the early 2040s.
Okay, that makes perfect business sense. Now, you mentioned the economics of physics. Let's unpack that. This goes beyond just being fit, doesn't it? We're into production insurance territory here.
And we're moving straight into the actuarial table.
Yeah.
Bond films demand this immense, continuous physical commitment. We're talking high-speed chases, explosions, really complex fight choreography that you have to repeat dozens of times for different camera angles.
And as an actor gets older, that risk profile just changes completely.
It really does. I mean, explain the difference in risk between a 35-year-old and, say, a 48-year-old doing the same big stunt sequence.
Well, for starters, the insurance premiums just skyrocket.
They go through the roof.
Studios pay massive amounts to insure their lead actors against any kind of injury that would shut down a production that costs, hundreds of millions of dollars?
And when an actor hits their late 40s or 50s, the time needed for recovery from high-impact stunts just increases exponentially. A minor sprain that a 35-year-old shakes off in a week might sideline a 50-year-old for a month.
And that costs the studio millions in downtime. So their agent is going to demand more mandatory rest and recovery time written into the contract as they get older.
Which their agent will absolutely demand. And that messes with the production schedule and the overall budget. It's the core business reality. The body's capacity for that kind of grueling stunt work just diminishes.
So they need someone who can handle 5 films worth of escalating physical demands without forcing them to rely almost entirely on, like, expensive CGI or stunt doubles.
Because that erodes the grounded authenticity that Daniel Craig worked so hard to establish. Longevity isn't about wanting a young face. It's about securing the profitability and the physical integrity of the franchise for the next decade plus.
Okay, that brings us to requirement number 2. This one seems like it should be totally immutable, but it gets challenged all the time by fan casting.
British heritage and accent.
A deal breaker.
It's a deal breaker. Bond is inherently, globally, and definitionally a British spy. The studio needs someone with a genuine British background and a flawless, preferably standard British accent. This isn't about snobbery, it's brand identity. It's a cultural contract.
So if they cast, say, an American or an Australian, and the accent is even slightly off or feels forced, what's the consequence?
It just clashes so severely with the foundation that Ian Fleming built. Bond is an agent of MI6. He is intrinsically linked to the British establishment. If that accent sounds anything other than native,
It pulls the audience right out of the world.
instantly. It signals a fundamental misunderstanding of the character's core identity. And for a franchise that relies on billions of dollars in international distribution, you just can't risk that. That authenticity is critical.
So there we have it. Our twin pillars for qualification. Youth for long-term profit, and Britishness for cultural authenticity. With those rules set, let's look at the players who bring this tremendous prestige baggie. Well, they fundamentally violate those 2 pillars. We're starting with the veterans.
The heavy hitters, these are the names that make the studio really stop and calculate. Is the immediate guaranteed box office worth crippling our entire long-term plan?
And the most popular name for delivering that dark, visceral 007 is, of course, Tom Hardy.
Hardy is just magnetic. He's 48 years old, but his intensity is completely unrivaled. If he took the role, we would immediately get that brutal, bloody, merciless 007 that everyone talks about.
So you have that silent menace. You watch him in a film like Warrior or The Revenant, and you just believe he's a force of nature.
He is. His strength is that he can blend this really layered, dramatic acting with absolutely convincing, intense action.
He's the type who speaks less and fights more. A field agent who communicates through pure presence and violence more than dialogue.
Exactly. The charisma, the acting chops, the physical credibility, it's all top tier. He would deliver an explosive first film, but, and it's a huge but, the massive business constraint is his age. He's 48.
Wait a minute, though. He looks younger than his age. He definitely does. And he's universally loved. Why can't the studio just make an exception? Why not give him, say, an abbreviated trilogy?
I mean, people bring up Robert Downey Jr. redefining his career past 40. Why can't Hardy just deliver 2 explosive films and retire if the box office is guaranteed?
It's a great question, but it brings us back to that idea of a franchise runner versus a brilliant cameo. The first film of any reboot is always the most expensive. You're establishing the new tone, the new villains, the supporting cast. You're building the entire infrastructure.
And if you only get 2 or 3 films out of that actor, you have to start that incredibly expensive reboot cycle all over again in just 6 or 7 years.
So it's the difference between investing in a short-term asset and a long-term engine of profit.
That's it, exactly. By the time Hardy finished a 3rd film, he'd be nearing 60. And even if he looks fantastic, the demands of maintaining that level of stunt work in your late 50s are they're too expensive to ensure, and they're too taxing on the actor to sustain across 5 films.
So his time would just run out too quickly to justify that massive initial investment.
The numbers just don't work for the studio's decade-plus strategy. It's a brutal reality.
That puts a huge damper on the brutal Bond dream. Okay, let's move to the next veteran, a name that is synonymous with global box office success. Chris Evans.
Captain America himself.
Yeah. Evans is 44, so he's also defying the age requirement, but he has this sheer, undeniable, instant global star power.
He's one of the few actors on this list where, for a lot of people, the age thing almost seems irrelevant because he maintains such incredible physical condition. Age is just a number.
The potential commercial upside is just staggering. I mean, if Evans guarantees astronomical box office right out of the gate, which he almost certainly would, you'd think the studio might be tempted to overlook the clock.
You would. He's known to absolutely rock the role. He can handle demanding stunts. The casting would cause, mass hysteria among fans. Metaphorically, girls will tear their clothes.
He's got the physical chops, the international recognition, the action experience from a decade of blockbusters. But he faces two huge hurdles, and one of them is almost entirely psychological.
Let's start with that one, contract fatigue.
Right. Evans spent over a decade locked into the biggest restrictive contract in cinema history with Marvel. The Bond role demands a similar, if not more intrusive, commitment.
It really does. It's a minimum 10-year period where he can't sign on for competing massive franchises, where his schedule is entirely dictated by Eon Productions, where he has to be available for these mandatory month-long global press tours.
The loss of creative autonomy is immense.
It's huge. And after successfully navigating his way out of the Marvel machine, Evans may just not be in the mood to lock himself down again. He's earned the right to pick smaller, more creatively flexible projects.
Committing to Bond means surrendering all of that flexibility for another decade. And financially, he doesn't need the security of 007.
Which gives him all the leverage to just walk away from that kind of commitment.
Okay, and the second hurdle, the one that's probably insurmountable.
The accent. Bond must be British. Evans is distinctly, famously American. His entire identity is intrinsically linked to his nationality. And while actors can train their accents...
Forcing an American superstar into this role?
Yeah.
It feels like it risks breaking that cultural contract with the audience you mentioned.
It does. The moment he says Bond, James Bond, and it sounds even slightly off, the entire credibility of your £200 million production just wobbles.
It would mean rewriting the core identity of the character. And for a franchise this rooted in tradition, that just seems highly, highly unlikely.
So while the veterans bring incredible star power, they're fundamentally disqualified by either the ticking clock or the indelible national identity of the character.
They're sprints when the studio needs a marathon runner.
Exactly. A marathon runner who is dedicated to the long-term health of the brand.
Okay, let's pivot. Let's go to the next category actors who visually and aesthetically just hit the mark perfectly. They have the pedigree, but they still face these specific challenges. We're calling them the aesthetically perfect.
Right. This is where we start seeing the actors who look like they stepped straight off the pages of an Ian Fleming novel.
And first up, we have Richard Madden. He's got serious pedigree. He's known globally for Game of Thrones, a role in the Marvel Universe, and high-profile spy thrillers like Citadel.
Madden is 39, so he's much closer to that desired 30s bracket than Hardy or Evans. He has that clean-cut aesthetic that really recalls the classic Bonds of the 90s, that sleek, modern, gentleman spy look.
And there was a real fan groundswell for him at one point.
Yeah.
That hashtag Madden4Bond tag was circulating pretty heavily. He just looks the part of a classy secret agent.
He certainly does, but his obstacles are, I think, twofold. Physicality and nationality.
Okay, physicality first. I've heard the critique that he might take a beating in fights. What does that actually mean?
It's a gentle way of saying he lacks the sheer bulk or muscle mass that we've come to expect from Daniel Craig's Bond, a Bond who looked like he could genuinely withstand a brutal, drawn-out fight.
Right. The modern 007 has to appear rugged, capable of high-impact violence, and physically intimidating.
Exactly. And while Madden is undeniably handsome and capable, he would need a really rigorous extended bulk-up regimen to credibly pull off the physical brutality of the role. And that's a regimen that has to be sustained across all the subsequent films.
It's solvable, but it does raise questions about his natural fit for the aggressive, grounded physicality that's in demand today.
It does. And the second issue is nationality. He is not British.
Which, as we established, is a major, major obstacle.
Especially given the strength of the competition who are British. It's a significant hurdle, a strong contender. But that one issue is a big one.
All right, let's move to the candidate who, for many people, is just the physical manifestation of James Bond, Henry Cavill.
Cavill is. He's in a league of his own, visually. He is 42, which puts him outside the 30s mandate, but the descriptions of him are just so effusive. Classy, powerful, royal, sexy.
He doesn't just wear a suit, he weaponizes it.
Yeah.
He embodies that perfect gentleman spy who looks effortlessly incredible.
And he projects this immediate lethal credibility. You don't question his 00 status for a single second.
Just for a sec.
He's already highly skilled in complex action, especially hand-to-hand combat and gun handling, which we've seen in his recent work. He projects such an aura of, lethal, world-weary experience that you can easily imagine his opponents would think 10 times before fighting him.
Oh, yeah. Think about his sequences in Mission Impossible Fallout, that bathroom fight, the precision, the sheer force. It's the perfect blend of elegance and extreme grounded violence.
Visually, watching his action sequences would be, quite simply, an orgasm for the eyes. He is maybe the only actor who can perfectly marry the required physical brutality of the Craig era with the effortless, charming sophistication of the traditional Bonds, like a Connery or a Brosnan.
And what's so fascinating about Cavill is that this isn't his first time at the Bond rodeo.
No, this is his second major run at the role. He famously auditioned against Daniel Craig for Casino Royale and was passed over because he was deemed too young at the time.
And now, almost 2 decades later, the studio is concerned he might be too old. The timing has just been tragically cruel for him.
It really has. But despite being 42, his box office guarantee is immense. He's a sure thing.
He offers stability. He can immediately step into the role of an experienced, mature 007, a gentleman who can kill without closing his school, meaning he's already been refined by years of espionage.
With him, the studio would be buying instant, proven global success.
And there's this amazing historical irony to his recent projects that ties him so perfectly to the Bond legacy.
Yes, his work in the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, it's incredibly relevant. That film is based on the real-life operations of Churchill's covert World War II unit.
The very unit that Ian Fleming himself studied and drew massive inspiration from when he created James Bond.
Exactly. So Cavill has conceptually already played the proto-Bond. He's played the exact historical seed from which the character sprang. It's conceptually perfect.
It's a phenomenal meta-narrative for his casting. But we're back to the core dilemma. Cavill is the perfect image, the conceptual ideal, a massive box office guarantee. But he's 42. He's just slightly out of compliance with that strict 15-year mandate.
And he forces the studio to ask the biggest strategic question of all. Do we accept a shorter franchise run, maybe 4 guaranteed blockbusters, to get the best possible aesthetic and guaranteed success right now?
Or do we prioritize securing the next decade and a half with a younger, less proven candidate?
That 4-year age difference between Cavill and the next contender on our list, well, that could cost the studio billions in long-term global revenue.
That 4-year difference is the multi-billion-dollar question. And that brings us perfectly to the actor who, by all accounts, has done his homework and checks every single box the studio has mandated.
This is Section 5. This is where the business logic triumphs over raw star power. Aaron Taylor Johnson.
So introduce us to the man who is reportedly the frontrunner, the ideal profile for the future of 007.
Aaron Taylor Johnson is 35 years old. He is, on paper, the one candidate who meets every single explicit requirement laid out by the producers for the long-term health and stability of this franchise.
Let's start by just ticking those 2 critical boxes that disqualified the heavy hitters.
Okay. 1, he's 35. That lands him perfectly in the desired 30s range. It maximizes the contractual run. The studio can realistically plan for 5, maybe even 6 films that would take him into his early 50s.
And he's starting with peak physical capability and lower insurance premiums.
Exactly. 2, he is unequivocally British. That eliminates any accent or authenticity issues right off the bat. He fits the mold of the modern, yet fundamentally English gentleman spy.
So he satisfies the mandate for youth and Britishness, the 2 hurdles that tripped up everyone else. What about his experience and readiness?
He has significant action experience. He's demonstrated maturity in his roles, and crucially, he's reportedly ready and enthusiastic to commit to that long-term restrictive contract. He is what the business analysis calls all virtuous.
All virtuous?
Possessing all the necessary virtues for the role without any of the major liabilities.
But let's talk about his celebrity profile, because this is where the financial advantage really kicks in for the studio. He's been in massive films, including 2 Marvel roles, Quicksilver and the upcoming Kraven the Hunter, but he hasn't yet reached that globally defining top-tier A-list fame, like a Tom Hardy or a Chris Evans.
And that paradox is the studio's massive financial advantage. He's known and respected, so he offers box office assurance, but he hasn't been defined by a singular global franchise that would lead to, exorbitant salary demands and scheduling headaches.
He's still slightly below that very top echelon of stardom.
Which means a much smaller initial paycheck for the studio and more contractual flexibility.
Right. When you cast a truly global superstar, their agent demands a huge upfront fee, mandatory profit participation from film one, massive guarantees.
Exactly. Taylor Johnson represents a significant reduction in financial risk. He can be hired on what is essentially a rising star contract with controlled salary increases across multiple films.
And the studio gets maximum creative control, right?
Yeah.
He's hungry for a defining role.
Absolutely. Becoming Mr. Bond wouldn't just launch his career, it would anchor it for a decade of massive success. This role would be defining for him, which means he's much less likely to push back on demanding schedules or intense training.
So he's the perfect blend of established capability and rising star ambition.
If you consider the studio's known plan to choose a young, British actor for a long, stable, and financially secure run, Taylor Johnson becomes the only truly logical choice.
He's the safest bet.
He is. He aligns perfectly with the future business strategy of the Bond franchise. He's the strategic choice, allowing the studio to maximize the return on their investment for the next decade and guarantee longevity well into the 2040s.
This has been a deep dive that really just underlines the reality of this whole thing. This casting is far less about who looks the part on a poster.
And entirely about who fits the business spreadsheet for the long term. The spreadsheet truly rules Hollywood, especially with a legacy franchise this big.
The visual appeal is just the entrance fee. The contractual commitment is the price of admission.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's wrap this up in our final competition summary. We've established that this entire battle basically distills down to two primary archetypes.
It really does. It's the ultimate zero-sum game in Hollywood. Business logic versus aesthetic perfection. And the primary rivalry is intense, focused entirely on Aaron Taylor Johnson and Henry Cavill.
So on one side, you have Aaron Taylor Johnson, the perfect studio choice. He's young, he's British, he's willing to commit to the most favorable long-term contract. He represents the strategic, financially sensible future.
And on the other side, you have Henry Cavill, the perfect aesthetic choice. He's experienced, he embodies that royal, classy ideal of Bond, and he's a proven box office certainty, but he offers a necessarily shorter franchise lifespan.
And this brings us to the core dilemma that the studio heads must be agonizing over, and it's the one we leave with you, the listener. Will the studio prioritize securing the perfect fit for the long-term contract, the Taylor Johnson path?
Or will they choose the actor who embodies the absolute pinnacle of the established Bond persona and just accept a shortened franchise life in exchange for that immediate, unassailable perfection, the Cavill path?
It's a choice between what? Strategic patience? Betting on Taylor Johnson's eventual star ascent?
And immediate guaranteed gratification, leveraging Cavill's proven global appeal.
And the choice they make will signal everything about the next era of Bond. The actor defines the tone. If they choose someone like Taylor Johnson, who's younger and less defined, does the tone shift back toward the classy gentleman style, maybe moving away from the brutal, grounded realism that Craig cemented?
Or, conversely, if they choose the more seasoned, polished veteran like Cavill, does that automatically guarantee a return to a more formal, high-stakes, world-trotting espionage narrative, maybe sacrificing some of the raw physical danger of the Craig era?
The choice dictates whether 007 in the 2030s will be defined by polish or by grit. It's all about the legacy and the future direction of the world's most famous spy.
And that leads to a provocative final thought for you to consider. If the studio does stick to their guns and select a younger actor in their mid-30s, like an Aaron Taylor Johnson, how will they successfully balance that necessary youth and energy?
For a decade of stunts.
With the world-weary maturity that fundamentally defines 007, that 00 status has to look earned. The actor has to look young enough to fight 1,000 battles, but somehow old enough to have already won them.
That, my friends, is the deep dive into the race for 007. We'll see you next time.